It soars high through the skies of Amonkhet on downy feathers, but it is no angel. Its intellect is devilish, but it is no demon. Flying so high in the sky, it looks tiny from below, yet when it swoops, its shadow grows and grows and grows until it blots out the sun. Yet it is no dragon. It is an amalgamation of nature, a god's crafted being, part lion, part eagle, majestic, floating on thermal drafts radiating up from the baked sand below, its lustrous wings reflecting the soft orange glow of Ra back into the sky. It is the Sphinx, Unesh, sovereign of his domain. As his glowing blues survey his skies and the land below him, he knows that to contend with a god pharaoh, he must use every weapon at his disposal, even the ones he's left for dead. Welcome to the Uncommon Commander. Today I've got an older creature card that I'd like to talk about, and a deck tech built around it. That commander, of course, is Unesh, Criosphinx Sovereign. He is a legendary creature Sphinx with a mana value of 6, a 4/4 body, and flying. He also has a cost reduction of 2 generic mana for Sphinxes that you cast, and an ability that says, whenever Unesh, Criosphinx Sovereign, or another Sphinx enters the battlefield under your control, reveal the top 4 cards of your library. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. Put one pile into your hand, and the other into your graveyard. So, notice any similarities? Yeah, pseudo-factor fiction is now attached to every single one of the Sphinxes that you play, and those Sphinxes cost 2 fewer mana each. Seems good. So the game plan for today's deck is to get Unesh in play and start casting Sphinxes to fill up your hand and graveyard. Then reanimate the crap that you chucked into the graveyard. Nobody expects the mono blue Reanimator. I do want to mention that today's deck will come out to about a total of $195.46 if you're buying it from TCG Player. And if you are, please consider buying through my TCG Player link in the video description. I also have a small Patreon if you'd like to support the creation of the videos that way instead, and the link can be found below. Finally, clicking the like and subscribe button is both free and super helpful to my channel. Thanks. There's something we need to talk about before we move on, because it's a bit of an issue if we don't consider it while we're building. Sphinx Tribal has a problem, and it's the same problem that almost all of the popular flying tribes have, those being angels, dragons, and demons. The problem is that they all cost about 6 mana to cast. They're almost never 3 or 4 mana, much less 2. The mana curve for these tribes always skews high as a result, so we need to cast a couple of ramp spells early on because we need Unesh and his cost reduction. This inevitably becomes a somewhat big mana deck if we can't get Unesh to stick. So we've got 2 types of ramp that we care about most. Small ramp spells that let us accelerate into casting Unesh, and splashy mana spells that let us cast a whole bunch of really big stuff all at once. Our small scale ramp will be Wayfarer's Bauble, Arcane Signet, Dreamscape Artist, Mindstone, Ornithopter of Paradise, Burnished Heart, Sky Diamond, Thought Vessel, Midnight Clock, and Mitotic Manipulation. Sitting somewhere in between small and splashy are Everflowing Chalice and Skyclave Relic. It just depends on how much mana you want to put into those. Our splashy ramp spells are going to be High Tide, Gauntlet of Power, and Caged Sun. Gauntlet of Power is symmetrical, but we should get the most benefit from it seeing as we'll be choosing blue and we're in mono blue. Still, careful of other blue players at the table because now they can cast their stuff like counter spells just that much easier. A cool thing about Unesh is that he gets cards into your graveyard for you as long as you're casting Sphinxes, and you have opponents who aren't just giving you all of the cards because they want you to win. I'm assuming your opponents just aren't that nice. But it never hurts to get just a few more cards into your own graveyard. Okay, sometimes it hurts, but we'll fly over that bridge when we come to it. These are our cards that will fill up our graveyard. Vexing Sphinx, Sphinx of Lost Truths, City Watch Sphinx, Dream Eater, and Mirror Mad Phantasm. Most of these are Sphinxes, so they'll mill you and you'll still get to trigger Unesh with them, all at the same time. For those who dislike the very idea of milling yourself, try to remember as it's happening that, to a Reanimator deck, this is really just another form of card draw. Since we've filled our graveyard, let's also fill our hand. To assist with that, we've got Monastery Siege, which can also instead be used as a protection card, Arbiter of the Ideal, Consecrated Sphinx, Sphinx Ambassador, who lets you use your opponent's cards, Windreader Sphinx, and Sphinx of Uthud for double factor fictions. Not far from being card draw, we have these Sphinx spells as well. Rescuer Sphinx, which lets you reuse one of your Sphinx spells to trigger Unesh again, and triggers Unesh itself. Master of Predicaments, which uses our extremely flat mana curve to our advantage. Seriously, it's more of a mana plane than it is a mana curve. The scry spells Sphinx of Foresight and Prognostic Sphinx. And finally, Jwar Isle Avenger, who costs 3 mana but is actually 1 mana because of Unesh most of the time. Alright, he's basically card draw by virtue of being a Sphinx. Still, a 1 mana 4 card factor fiction attached to a 3/3 flyer is pretty fantastic. Time to talk about the 8 cards that give this deck its playstyle. These are our Reanimator cards, some of which are actually Reanimator cards. The rest are recursion, so I mean that's not that far off. The recursion spells are Recall, Ghost of Ramirez DiPietro, and Scholar of the Lost Trove, who is, of course, a Sphinx. Our reanimation cards are Body Double, Sorta, Hour of Eternity, God Pharaoh's Gift, Dreams of the Dead, which totally looks like it won't work due to color restrictions, but we'll address that issue next, and the card that was sitting in my binder that made me come up with this harebrained deck idea, Back from the Brink. I really wish that card's ability wasn't sorcery speed, because at instant speed this would be way more fun. But then I guess it'd be like a $10 card, so let's discuss how we're going to make Dreams of the Dead work. As you may have noticed, it only works if the creatures that you're targeting in your graveyard are white or black. That's a bit of an issue because, as you may have noticed, this deck is mono blue. So what's a blue mage to do? Why, make the whole world as blue as him, of course. Yes, now my sadness can be your sadness with these color-changing cards. Simply target Dreams of the Dead with Whim of Volrath and change white or black into blue. But that's not very mana efficient, so why not cast Swirl the Mists and turn all instances of color words into blue for good? Take target blue or blue creature from your graveyard and put it directly into play as though it were just summoned. Yes, please. Oh, also, that protects our creatures from Doomblade. Better yet, why change the text of just one card when you could use the nuclear option? Painter's Servant is no starving artist, costing $50 to cast, but it'll add the color of your choice to all of the cards in the game. In this case, white or black. Thanks, Painter's Servant. Okay, let's get Unesh to stick. Monastery Siege does some work protecting him, and Swirl the Mists, also kinda protects him. But we have these cards which do a bit more of a thorough job. These are Teferi's Time Twist, which can save him from all sorts of removal and cause him to trigger an extra time as he re-enters the battlefield, Siren Stormtamer, Diplomatic Escort, Silumgar Sorcerer, and Elgod Shieldmate, who is, in my opinion, super underrated. Now that we're protected from removal, let's do some removing of our own. Kind of a meta pick for me, but Suspend can send an opponent's creature into exile and place 2 Suspend counters on it. It's temporary removal for 1 mana. Alternatively, you could exile your own creature with it as a last-ditch protection spell, as long as you won't need that creature for a couple of turns. We also have Curse of the Swine, Echoing Truth, and the hilarious to use on your own stuff with Unesh on the board, Hour of Need, Raven Form, Amphin Mutineer, Subtlety, Enigma Thief, and Scourge of Fleets. Okay, we're casting Sphinxes, populating our graveyard, making our library tiny. Oh my god, it's getting so tiny. Please don't mill me. Now, how are we going to win? Well, those aforementioned Sphinxes are like 4 to 5 power each, so combat damage is a possibility. But if you're looking for something a bit more exotic, let's lean into that tiny little library of ours. For this we have Thassa's Oracle, Ormos Archive Keeper, and Atemsis, All-Seeing. The odd one out here is Atemsis, and not just because of all of its eyes. but you'll be filling your hand quickly enough with a strong variety of mana values that I don't think you'll mind how odd a Tempest is. If you want another redundancy to these, consider Jace Wielder of Mysteries or Laboratory Maniac. I prefer Jace because he actually does something. Now, if we want to soar, we're going to need a nice, tall mana base to take off from. Oh my gosh, that line is awful. Our utility lands are Buried Rune, Ghost Quarter, Tectonic Edge, Scavenger Grounds, which we only want to use if we absolutely have to, Reliquary Tower, and the land ramping Myriad Landscape, Terrain Generator, and Drownyard Temple. To clarify, Drownyard Temple will become a 3-mana ramp spell if it gets discarded or milled into your graveyard. Our basic lands are 26 untapped islands. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to go over the final 5 cards in the deck in a fun little segment that I have dubbed The Final Countdown! These cards are 5 cards that are given extra significance in this deck due to their synergy with our commander. Let's start with number 5. Know how Fact or Fiction costs 4 mana to potentially get 5 cards, but probably not that many unless you're really cagey? Well, Argent Sphinx costs 1 mana to get you 4 cards, if you're really cagey. Moving on to number 4, I have to ask the question, since we're in blue, why have 1 Unesh when you could have 2? With Spark Double, you'll get an extra copy of Unesh, and every time you cast a Sphinx, you'll get 2 triggers from Unesh. Also, your Sphinx spells will cost 4 less mana to cast, so have fun with your nearly free Sphinx army. But of course, if we're asking the question about having 2 Uneshes on the board, why wouldn't we ask for maybe 6? This is going to get mathematical, so buckle up, because number 3 is Rite of Replication. Unesh is on the board, and sees 5 Uneshes enter. All 5 of those also see each other enter the battlefield. This creates 30 triggers of Unesh, making you reveal 30 times 4 cards, which is 120. Obviously, you've just decked yourself. Almost. Unesh has you reveal the cards and put them in your hand. He doesn't draw them, so you're not quite decked yet, and therefore you haven't lost the game. Yet. It's best that you cast Thassa's Oracle or Ormos as soon as you've revealed your entire deck. You've been warned. And speaking of warning people, doesn't it suck that you have to reveal basically every card you draw while everyone else gets to draw and hide that information? Well, I think that's unfair. So at number 2, I'm going to clue you in on a little replacement effect that'll tick all of your friends off. Zur's Weirding makes players play with their hands revealed, and is therefore a terrible anti-synergy with Master of Predicaments, to say nothing of Consecrated Sphinx. But it does make it so your opponents have to reveal their spells just like you do. Even better, players can stop them from getting awesome cards in their hand just by paying life. You'd think that would be kind of a hassle for you too, but you have to remember that Unesh isn't drawing you cards, he's just putting them in your hand, and that's not the same thing. So everyone else's draws get messed with, and you're free to keep on raking in all your cards. Not bad. But it's got nothing on our number 1 card. Imagine a card, if you will, with the same replacement effect as Zur's Weirding, except that instead of players being able to pay life to stop card draw is just stopped outright regardless. That card is Possessed Portal, and it's a mean old bastard of a card. If a player would draw a card, they skip that draw instead. But you won't, because you're putting cards into your hand, which is so very different from drawing, at least on paper. And cards are paper, so that's what matters. It also has, at the end of each turn, each player sacrifices a permanent unless he or she discards a card from his or her hand. So they can't draw cards, and their hands and board states are shrinking, while you can put cards into your hand, and your hand isn't shrinking as a result, and your board state is probably growing. Well, yeah, you're a jerk for playing this, but you also win at MTG, and when you win at MTG, it kind of feels like you're winning at life, right? Is that just me? Well, that's it, so I'm glad you all tuned in today. I hope you enjoyed this deck tech, and I look forward to getting the next one up for you. It was a lot of fun to build this jank for you today. Let me know if you enjoyed it, and let me know if I missed any cool cards that would play well in here. Next time you hear me, it'll be for a Golgari Combat Damage Matters deck. Be sure to tune in for that if it sounds fun to you. Bye-bye for now.